There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 357. And today I'm joined by Justin Hollandsworth of Whitetail Addictions TV to discuss high-risk, high-reward tactics that lead to DIY deer hunting success, and much more. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by Onyx. My guest today is Justin Hollandsworth. He is a serious deer nut from Central Ohio, a member of the Whitetail Addictions TV team, and I think this is fair to say, a disciple of the Andrae D'acquisto School of Deer Hunting. You know, Justin, like Andrae and a whole bunch of others who've kind of come out of this coaching tree, maybe you could call it, folks like Adam Hayes and Dan Infault and others, Justin is a mobile deer hunter who makes aggressive moves when needed to get in tight on big mature deer. So today I wanted to dig into what makes Justin tick, why he does what he does, how exactly he is having such consistent deer hunting success year after year. And I think this stuff, while in his case is being applied to trying to kill a big old buck, it could also help you if you're trying to kill any buck, or if you're trying to kill your first 2-year-old buck, or whatever it is your goal is. These things can help you. And let me tell you, this is a good one. Justin's got a great perspective, and I think he just effectively is able to share his thought process from past hunts in a very helpful way. But probably the biggest takeaway, if I had to drill down to just one thing for me in this episode, it was Justin's repeated suggestion. He kept on reminding us that we need to sometimes go beyond the normal routine. We sometimes have to push outside of our comfort zone, whether that's by trying completely new tactics, going to new places, or maybe just pushing in further or pushing harder for a buck than we ever thought we would. And that, my friends, I think is a really good piece of advice. So I'd say we should just get right into it. But before that, I do just have to go through some real quick little house cleaning here. Longtime listeners out there, you've probably noticed that we've had a few more ads running than we did 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. And sometimes those ads aren't even hunting related. And I know ads can be a drag sometimes. I feel that way too. It is just a thing that you got to do. It helps us keep this free show going. They help support other big projects that we put out there for free, like the Back 40 video series and all that. And they keep me here and able to be talking to you. So I just wanted to recognize that, hey, I know that's a little different. I know that maybe you roll your eyes on occasion when you hear those. I thank you for your patience. I thank you for your support. And then I'm just going to come right back at you, though, speaking of ads, and give you one more right now, a shameless plug. If you're looking for a last-minute or belated Father's Day gift idea, I got to give you a quick suggestion. Maybe your dad or another father in your life would like my book, That Wild Country, an epic journey through the past, present, and future of America's public lands. As you know, probably from hearing the podcast, this book covers the history of how we got all these big wild public places and a whole series of wild adventures exploring them. You can get it wherever books are available, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, whatever. I appreciate it. I think your dad would like it. And now, with all that out of the way, I promise it is time to get to the show. All right, with me now on the line is Justin Hollandsworth. Justin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad that we can have this chat. It's I don't know how it is for you, but I'm thinking about deer all year long. Probably every day there's something I'm thinking about, but I have a little bit of an ebb and flow where my crazy meter can sometimes go from like 80 to 150, and that crazy meter goes exponentially higher as we get into the summer. So once June hits and you start seeing a velvet buck or two, I get a little weird, and that's where I'm at right now. And so talking with somebody like you is the perfect way to scratch that itch. So that's my long-winded way of saying I'm excited about this.
No, I'm glad to be on. I've been listening to your podcast for a while now, and I love them.
Glad to hear that. I appreciate it. Well, if you've listened to past episodes, then you know I usually like to kick these off with just a little bit of an intro from you. If people don't know who you are, what you do, can you just give us the quick 101 on your background and what you're up to?
Yeah. So I grown up in Ohio, live in Central Ohio, and have for the last 20 years. And I work as a construction project manager, but I've been involved with Lone Wolf and Lone Wolf Custom Gear for almost 20 years now. Matter of fact, I've not shot a Pope and Young whitetail out of anything other than a D'acquisto design stand, and currently working with them on the Lone Wolf Custom Gear side of things, but I'm also the co-producer along with Byron Horton, who's the main producer, and Heath Cisco, another co-producer for the Whitetail Addiction show. So that's what I'm doing these days. But more importantly, I'm just another average guy out there that is absolutely addicted to whitetails and love everything about them.
That's the kind of person I like to talk to. It's funny. I know a lot of really good hunters down in Ohio, and it was very strange. I was watching, I can't remember if I was watching one of your videos or if I was listening to a conversation you were having with someone on a podcast or something, but it struck with me that there's another friend of mine from down in Ohio. He's more towards Cincinnati that literally sounds exactly like you. The two of you have the exact same voice, the exact same pauses in your voice. You could flip you and my buddy Mike out, and it's like I'm talking to the same guy, and you're both absolute killers. So it's a weird Ohio voice thing that's going on right now, but I had to mention it because it just kind of blew my mind when I realized it. You're not happen to be related to a great deer hunter down in Cincinnati, do you?
No, but somebody else has said the same thing to me one other time. So I have to look this guy up because I don't know this guy. So
I'll shoot you his name afterwards. I don't know. Maybe it's an Ohio accent or something that I've never noticed before that all of a sudden is starting to stand out to me. But yeah, there's no shortage of good deer hunters down that state. You guys are fortunate to not only be good hunters, but also have some great hunting. If you've hunted in a lot of other states, I know Iowa, you've been all over the place, but how does your home state rank? Is that your favorite? Or do you still like going out to places like Iowa? Is that still special?
I love Ohio. And I have a lot of time to prepare here, and we have some great deer. There's no doubt. I don't know, something about Iowa. It's just like the cream of the crop, though. It's hands down my favorite. But Illinois is great. Kansas is great. There's a lot of really good states. But if I had to, Iowa's my number one, and I would say I would probably rank Ohio 4. But maybe that's just because I live here. But wow. I have a lot of time to prepare, here. And I think that's why I consistently have success, is just because of my preparation and everything that I do, where I tend to a lot of times I leave Ohio and hunt the rut in other states because a lot of the deer that I'm after just who knows where they are.
Right. It's harder to keep track of them from a long distance, that's for sure. So I've got a weird way I want to kick this off. And you can answer this however it kind of rings true to you. But why would you say you're a deer hunter? Is it, I guess you could answer that as far as what led you to being a hunter, or why you love it so much, or I don't know. I guess I shouldn't answer the question for you. I should let you answer. Why are you a deer hunter, Justin?
Well, I think for me, it started when I was a kid, and my grandfather, who was always talking about deer hunting, and I remember a lot of those conversations, and he talked a lot about a guy by the name of Roger Rothar. And Roger and I grew up in north central Ohio, so Roger was not that far. And I remember my grandfather always talking about the sky and everything. And I remember I think just being around my grandfather so much, and he just built up the whitetails, so much in my head. So when the first time that I ever went and hunted, I went out and my grandfather had shot a doe like right in front of me. And, man, I'm telling you, I was just hooked from that day forward. Is all I could think about. I think I probably told most of the kids at my school that I actually shot that deer, which I did not. and it was just after that, I mean, I was just fascinated with the whitetails. I mean, I did like science fair projects on whitetail deer movement.
That's awesome.
Like I'd be sitting in a social studies class, and I'd have North American whitetail in that book instead of actually paying attention and doing the things I probably should have been doing.
Yep.
But I just got bit with the bug, and I don't know, the whitetail is just you cannot tell me that there's more magnificent of an animal than a whitetail. I just have a hard time believing that.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. There's something about them. It's hard to shake it once you get the bug. It's funny you said the magazines in social studies class. That is literally. I read my deer hunting magazines in all my classes, but for whatever reason, I remember specifically getting in trouble in a social studies class. I was sitting in the back row of my high school. It would have been my junior year, I think, and my buddy Josh Hilliard, who people know as Furter, was sitting next to me, and I was trying to get him into deer hunting at that point. And I'm showing him deer and deer hunting and North American whitetail magazines in the back of class, and we got called out and yelled at, and that one sticks with me. So that something about social studies.
I think we've all done that.
Yeah, I think so. So it sounds like that obsession in high school is definitely still going for you now. I heard you say that you try to do at least one thing whitetail related every day. Would you say, is that accurate still? And if so, what did you do today, or what do you plan on doing the next day or two?
Well, yesterday I was setting trail cameras for a big portion of the day. And, today I was actually coming back from a job site, and I noticed a piece of ground that just looked really, really good. Really, had the good cover. What a big whitetail would. And I literally pulled over at the next gas station and started, buzzing through Onyx, trying to figure out who owned that piece, and then did the what we all like to do is say, okay, there's that guy. So now I'm going to look him up on Facebook, and I'm going to start doing, just trying to, do we have any mutual friends, and like trying to, that was what I was doing today.
Has that ever worked for you? Have you ever been able to have a random drive-by and connect the dots and get permission or something?
For sure.
Any trick to it that you think helped that work out, or is it just getting lucky?
A mutual friend is tremendous. I mean, that can be in itself, if you have that, that foot in the door, that can go a long ways. And actually last year I got a piece that was just that. We had a mutual friend, and by the time I tracked them all down, and I had called her and I said, hey, I know this is completely random, but and I mentioned the guy's name. She's like, oh yeah, how do you know him? I'm like, well, I don't, but and then it led to that, and then probably over the course of about 3 weeks or so, I finally ended up with getting a permission slip.
That's amazing. I feel like one of the biggest things there is just like there's some number of people that want to get more permission, and then there's a smaller number of people that are thinking about it a lot. And I think this is a really important subgroup of people in that they're thinking about constantly getting that access, and then, take it that next step further like you did. Like you saw something that looked good, you looked it up, you tried to, drill down to other contacts and making it work. That seems to be something that is consistent among a lot of really good deer hunters is obsession with access, keeping on getting new permission, following up on leads. I've had periods where I'm good at it, periods where I'm not as good at it. But it seems like those guys and girls that are constantly thinking and adding to their list of spots, that's never a bad thing, don't you think? I mean, you can never have too many good spots.
Yeah, and because things just constantly change, and you never want to be stuck into limiting yourself to just a couple pieces of property, because maybe the caliber of deer that you're looking for is not on those pieces that maybe you've been hunting for years. And I just want to make sure that, going into each and every season, I have the caliber of buck that I'm looking for. And that gets harder as I get older and more further into this. Because let's face it, I don't care if you're in Ohio or Iowa or wherever you're at, a 150 plus deer is just, they're hard to find. And, but that's the challenge, and that's what I enjoy. I do like that part of it.
Yeah. So you're getting pickier and pickier. It sounds like, every year, as many people do, they get higher and higher expectations or goals, and now you're trying to find buck of a certain caliber like that. When you're trying to find new places, or when you're driving down the road and you see something and then you look at the map, what kind of criteria is it that you are looking for that makes you think, ooh, that could be the kind of spot that has the type of buck I'm after now? Like, how do you find that exceptional property?
I think the biggest thing is cover. The nastier it looks, the more I'm attracted to it. And I've had some experiences over the years, and I think a lot of guys have gone through this. We go through I have, some properties that, I can do a lot of things to. I can put food plots in, I can do some hinge cutting, those types of things. I've gotten access to pieces over the years where I've went in and thought, man, this is a killer piece. And maybe I had it for a couple of years. I'm like, okay, I'm going to put all these food plots in it and everything else. And I actually made some of these farms, I hurt them, to be honest with you. I took away too much cover, and some of the best pieces I think I've ever hunted are just nasty pieces. And I think that's where the older, mature deer tend to like, because I've got access to a couple pretty good sized farms that have a lot of big open timber on them, and they're 200-300 acre pieces, and they're just not nearly as good as this 10 acre piece that is just nasty.
Yeah. That seems to just draw them in. Now here's something. My buddy Andy and I were talking about this the other day. Do you think that you find the big old nasty buck in that thick stuff because that big old nasty buck sought that out and wanted to find the thickest, nastiest stuff to stay alive? Or was that a buck that just happened to grow up there, and because it was thick and nasty, he survived to become big and old?
I think it could go both ways. I think, but I also think too that, you say you have this 20-acre piece and it's thick and nasty or whatever, and you go in there and you kill that target buck. Because it is so good and because the spot is so bulletproof, when it comes to a deer being able to escape you, I think another deer just moves right in. Another mature deer, a lot of times will to move right into one of those spots. But I don't know. I've seen it both ways. Because I've grown deer on some places, and then I've also had places where I've killed a buck and another buck moved right in.
Yeah. It seems that thick stuff like that is in my experience has always been a really good starting point. Like if you find that, you're in the ball game. But then something I've kind of gone back and forth with throughout my deer hunting journey has been figuring out what's the next step. How do you work with that chunk of bedding area or that swamp or that thicket or whatever it is? At times I always thought, leave it untouched. Don't go in there. Don't spook the deer. Don't blow them out. Hunt on the edges. And then other times I've started thinking, maybe I need to get more aggressive. Maybe I should be pushing in there. Maybe I should be, I've kind of waffled and tried different things, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And I heard you telling a story recently, kind of similar to this, where you had gotten permission, I think, on a small property. It was a small, thick area. And you, at this time, I think it was earlier in your deer hunting career or journey or whatever, you were afraid to go in there because you'd always kind of heard some of the things I did, which was don't blow them out, don't spook those deer. Yep. But then your friend, Andrae D'acquisto, who a lot of us know from Lone Wolf and all the different things he's done, he told you to go in there and walk it, blow that deer right out of his bed if he had to. Can you tell me a little bit about that experience, that story, and what you learned from that? Was Andrae right? Was that the right thing to do?
Yeah, for sure it was. Because in years past, I would have never done that, because I would have just given that deer that and would have started on the edges and tried to catch that deer, and not knowing that piece either. That was the other tough part of it. So I remember I'd got access to that piece, and I knew there was actually two good bucks on that piece.
And how'd you know that?
A lot of guys like to scout. A lot of guys like to scout in the evenings in glass fields. I don't like to scout in the evenings because I'm kind of an early bird. Plus, I feel like I draw a lot of unwanted attention by by a parked truck with a set of binoculars hanging out the driver's side. Uh-huh. So I tend to go early, than late. I don't glass as much as I used to, but I told him about it, and he said, you need to just go in there. Don't care. Just learn the piece. And when you jump that deer up, then you know where in the general vicinity where he likes to be at this moment in time. And it was like August, I think. And I remember going in there and bumping that deer out of his bed and him escaping and I still had this whole thought in my head. I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I just do?
Shit.
Yeah. And I remember just like still cringing over that. I was like, oh, I don't know about that. But I had my way with that property at that point, and I was able just to do whatever I wanted and scout every bit of it, even though it was August and it was 90 degrees out, and you're dealing with the ticks and the mosquitoes and everything else. But I knew how everything laid in there, and I could see a lot of the old sign from the year before. and that just played out, perfect. I never caught up with that deer till I actually killed that deer the first week of gun season with my bow. We can bow hunt during our gun season, and I don't gun hunt. So it took me a minute to catch back up to him, but there was a lot of things, I had encounters with that deer prior to that I probably wouldn't have ever had if I had ever done that. And when that deer moved, that deer left that farm for a little bit in November. And when he showed back up, I sat in my truck and watched that deer for 2 evenings in a row, and I just didn't have the wind where I wanted to be. And as soon as the wind switched on that third day, I went in there and killed him.
Huh. Did he did the same kind of thing, or did he use the wind differently? Because this is something I'm always trying to do too, is see historical movements. And then when the wind gets right for you, you go in there, but then the deer doesn't show up. And then I wonder to myself, well, did they not show up because I waited for the wind that worked for me? What was the scenario for you?
It was kind of one of those winds where you're splitting the hairs. And I've always, Roger Rothar wrote about that in his book Whitetail Magic years ago. And, it was hunting that edge wind. And I call it flirting with disaster. Is what I call it, because you're on the edge of making it happen or not. And that was the wind that I had. There was a little more of, on the first 2 nights that it came out, there was a little more of a southeast to it. And the night that I killed him, it was a little more of the southwest. So he still had it. I think he had that false sense of security and the confidence of moving through that area. But I was just, I was just on that edge and just flirting with disaster, basically, and it worked. That taught me a lot right then.
Yeah, on the wind perspective, you're saying?
Yeah, that really opened my eyes. Because I had heard that before, and then when I read that in Roger's book, it made sense, and I'm like, I get that. I was always just bumping that deer out of that bed that time. I was always nervous about. I was always too nervous about getting busted, and I think that's the biggest problem. Sometimes you have to get uncomfortable. And I guess what I mean is you have to use some of those strategies and get out of your comfort little box that we all like to get in and stay in. And sometimes that just hurts you as far as trying to kill big deer. You have to try some new things. Yeah.
But man, like you said, you are flirting with disaster. And how many times do you do it where it is disaster? And it's not, that's the tough thing, is that it's so hard to pull off. I constantly find myself trying to do that same thing, but it's easier said than done in most cases, because there's so many little things that can go wrong, and you have to have everything go right to get that shot. I mean, you could pick the right wind, you could pick it so he feels comfortable coming out, you could pick it so that you don't think he's gonna pass where your wind is blowing, and you could still be in a position where he'll come through and think he's safe, but he won't realize you're there within shooting range. But then one doe could do the wrong thing, and she slips there and blows everything out. I mean, how do you, what are some of the things you do to try to minimize that risk? I don't know. It's a constant struggle for me. Are there any tricks you've found? Are there any things that you're thinking about, to take it to the next step to actually make that flirting with disaster work more times than not?
I think it's more of just one big thing is structure and terrain. Those things will, and maybe you have some fallen trees, or maybe there's a big, drop off from a creek, or maybe it's a pond, or what, so those things help a lot when you can use some stuff like that. and then other times it's cross your fingers and hope this works, because sometimes it's a one-shot deal. And there's been times where I've had deer come in where the gig is up, but my arrow's already coming.
Yeah. He's going to bust you right when you shoot him.
Yep. I mean, just being right on that edge of blowing it all up. I killed a deer. It's been, I don't know, probably 7-8 years ago. It's actually on one of our Whitetail Addictions episodes. And he's a big wide 10, and he had some split brows and a little like drop or something at one of his bases. That deer, I knew of that deer for a couple of years, and the night that I decided, okay, this is it, I'm going in to kill this deer tonight. Can I force you to win?
Can I put a timeout on you?
Yeah.
All right. I'm a jerk for doing this, but you got to tell me before you keep going. You got to tell me how you knew it was the night to go kill him.
Okay. Well, I was watching some cameras, and I just kind of, I stayed out, and that's the other thing. You have to be patient. You only have just a couple shots at these bucks sometimes, and I just kind of sat back and kind of let my cameras do the work. And then there was a lot of times too, like I would just maybe glass from afar, see if the deer was coming out to a field or whatever. But he was never, actually had a food plot in there, and he was never making it to that food plot till after dark. Well, I'd stepped back from an observation stand, and I could see some big rubs that were coming out. And I had a general idea, just knowing the property, about where the deer was. Well, I went in there and just poked around one day, and there was a hedge apple tree in there, and there was a pear tree. And that pear tree has never dropped any pears since that day. I don't know what the deal is on that tree. But it was loaded that year. And I just thought, he's staging up in here. He's hanging out before he makes it the rest of the way out. But what I noticed from the camera, like when he had a wind that was not in his favor, he was showing up 2-3 hours after dark. When he had a wind in his favor, he was making it in there and shooting light. And this was like October 8th or so, October 9th. And I just kind of hung out and just kind of waited for this to happen. And the deer had not showed up. He had a couple days in a row where he showed up well after dark. And the wind was switching. I'm like, well, if the wind switches that direction, he might show up in there early. And I'm like, I just have to take a chance, because he'll have that wind to his advantage as long as it doesn't lay down too much in the evening to create that swirl. Because I swear, once you get under 5 miles an hour, it's like, man, you just don't know. I mean, you're really risking a lot.
Yeah.
I slid in there, hung my set, and that was the only deer I seen that whole entire evening. And he came out, and I probably watched that deer for 80 yards or so. And I'm not kidding you. He literally would walk 5 yards, stop, listen, look around, and just repeat. And he did that for 80 yards. Like, he absolutely wore me out.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver, off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co and make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater.
We've all seen plenty of gadgets and fads come and go, but here's one product that stood the test of time: Seafoam Motor Treatment. Lots of hunters and anglers know that Seafoam helps engines run better and last longer. And it's really simple. When you pour it into your gas tank, Seafoam cleans harmful fuel deposits that cause engine problems. I'm talking common stuff like hard starts, rough engine performance, or lost fuel economy. Seafoam is an easy way to prevent or overcome these problems. Just pour a can in your gas tank and let it do its job. Now, you probably know someone who's used a can of Seafoam to get their truck or boat going again, because people everywhere rely on it to keep their trucks, boats, and small engines running the way they should the entire season. So, help your engine run better and last longer. Pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.
So you mentioned that the wind had shifted to be in his favor. Can you use that as an example to talk about how you positioned your stand? Because you hung a new set that day, it sounds like. So how did you use the way you thought he would use the wind and the way you were going to use the wind to make it work? Like, what was this? Paint that picture, I guess.
So I had where the apple and pear tree, the apple tree was there wasn't very many apples in there left on that. There was a ton of pears left. There was 2 big blowdowns, and I felt like he wouldn't come behind those blowdowns, just because he would end up he would lose too much of control of being able to scent check something for danger. So I got myself just on the one side of those where it was going to kind of force him to come up and around, but just where it was almost like where those blowdowns were, my scent was going to go right down those blowdowns, and he was just going to come right through the front. Now, obviously, that's what I played in my head and thought was going to work. It did work that way, but it doesn't always. And it kind of forced him to come right around. And at one point, the deer almost acted like, and maybe it was me being a little paranoid from watching him that long, but it almost seemed like he caught a little bit of me. But then he calmed back down and then moved through. So that structure kind of helped that deer it forced him through where I wanted him. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It's one of those things. I'm always looking for that. And when you find something, like if it's the blowdowns or if it's a river or a creek or a big drop-off ditch or something like that, it's great. And then it seems like for whatever reason with my luck, whenever I want to find something like that, I'm in like the most wide open, flat terrain with nothing special that's going to help me work it out and too many does or something like that. So
yeah,
that it's always tricky, but that puzzle, I guess, is what makes it so interesting.
Yeah, because you never know. I mean, and you have to try stuff, and you have to be, trust me, I've blown some pretty good opportunities, or I've gotten, busted before they ever, made it to me to be able to get a shot. But if you don't take any chances ever, you're taking a lot of opportunities away from yourself from filling tags.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like that's something that's kind of consistent with some of the guys that you hang out with. It seems like, I mean, for example, Andrae D'acquisto, he's one of those people that a lot of us have listened to some of the things he's said. that sounded like super aggressive. Going there like he told you that one day, like go in there and blow him out of his bed, or the infamous bump and dump kind of tactic that I've heard him talk about. I mean, has that mindset, is that a mindset that he has helped you develop too, or how do you or Andrae or any of those guys, how do you I don't know what I'm trying to say here, Justin. I guess what I'm trying to say is, how do you walk that line? How do you know when to get aggressive? How do you do it the right way? I don't know. What's your thoughts on that general issue?
So I think I don't get aggressive like right off the bat. I let some things kind of happen. And if I can kill a deer on an edge of a field or a food plot or whatever it may be, I'll go the safer route. But I also get a little bit of, I know sometimes I only have 2 or 3 hunts, and I gotta, I just know that a deer is gonna figure me out. I've got down out of a tree before and stuck a trail camera right on a tree before in video mode, just to see, man, you know what? I wonder if these deer, you see a big doe and she cuts your tracks and she trails you like a coon dog right to the tree. I always wonder, like at night after I leave, does this happen? And I've stuck a camera on a tree before and have had deer that I was hunting at the time trail me to my tree.
Ugh, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah. So you're like, so it's all situational. You have to follow your gut of when to get aggressive or when to set back and try to hunt those edges and let things happen that way. The rut, by the time I get to October 28th or so, I start getting antsy like a big old buck, because I'm like, oh God, I don't have that deer down yet. Uh-huh. And I start getting a little like, I know what's going to happen. He's going to get up on his feet and he's going to start searching other properties. Somebody else is going to kill him. He's going to get hit by a car. So when I start getting in that time frame, a lot of times I'm just like, I'm just going to go for broke. If I screw it up, I screw it up, because he's going to leave the property and be all over the place anyways. Mm-hmm. So it's either now or never.
When's the last time? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So I was just going to say, so sometimes that's when that kind of triggers me to get much more aggressive and start trying to kill those deer more in their bedrooms.
Yeah. So I was going to say, when's the last time you swung for the fences like that and it paid off?
Actually this past year, it's funny because myself and Andrae and Cody and a few of us have talked about this before. I don't know wherever this was wrote and why this ever become a big, hot topic, but of not hunting mornings in October.
Yep.
It was like, oh, we can't do that. It's like somebody said that, and that was like, and I think there's some truth to that, but I also think that you can kill a good buck too in the mornings. And this past year, the deer that I was hunting, and I sat back and all of a sudden I see this deer and he's getting super active in the morning, and it was like mid-October. And
so that's just from trail cameras you're seeing that?
Yeah. Yep. Just from trail cameras. And I see this deer and he's getting super active in the morning. And I typically would probably wait a little bit, but I'm like, you know what? That camera it's not lying to you. This deer is walking in broad daylight in the mornings, and he was working some scrapes next to a little food plot that I had. And and it was another one of those times. It was like, this is when you got to be aggressive and like come out of your comfort zone and get in there and try to kill the deer. And I went in there and I hunted the deer one time and killed him.
So those morning hunts in October, like you said, notoriously taboo, and like you said, it seems like sometimes for good reason, because they can be tricky. I've been really gun shy about October, about those mornings too. But it seems like if you've got the right situation and you do the right things, you can pull it off without spooking them on the way in or whatever. Can you describe how you actually got in there and set up without blowing them out? Because it's just so many times these mature bucks seem to come back. Now I know your cameras are telling you he wasn't coming back early, but how'd you get in there? Was it a hanging hunt in the morning? How'd you pull all that off?
So it was a hanging hunt in the morning. And I was actually set up in a big pine tree. And so my access in that place is really, really good. Actually, I jump a fence and walk with the horses in there.
Oh, nice.
And these horses will typically like walk right with me in there. So it kind of covers up everything that's going on. And I just walk with the horses all the way down, and then I just jump the fence, and it's literally from where the horses are to that tree is 30 yards, maybe.
Wow.
And I can slide right in and get set up. And, I only use a couple sticks because with those, those pine trees, there's so many branches and so I end up using a bunch of branches and stuff like that. So there's not a lot of that time, and then just throw the stand in. So the access is so key in that spot and being able to get in there in the morning. If that deer was doing that on another farm where I didn't have that kind of access, I don't know. I might have thought different. I might have said, okay, well, let me see. I'll let things develop more for the evenings, but that moon phase, which I'm a pretty big believer in the moon phase of dictating a lot of deer when they move. I think weather trumps everything, but coming off of that full moon, on the backside of those full moons, seem like the mornings are just really good, and they're just the deer are just really active. And that's exactly what was going on that morning. And I do believe that's what had him on his feet. Because prior to that, probably 5-6 days prior to that, we had a good rising moon, and he got real active for like 2 days in the evenings. And I was out of town on a work trip, and I had a cell cam in there, and it was taken. And I'm getting these pictures, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm about to leave this work trip.
That's the downside of those cell cameras.
Yeah,
drive you nuts.
So I know. So, and I just couldn't. The fact that all the kids, and the other thing too was it was one of the first good cold fronts of October, and those first cold fronts of October, like that first one, ooh, that's just always killer.
So you gotta elaborate on your moon stuff a little bit more. Do you pretty much follow the red moon guide theory verbatim, or do you have any kind of angles on it that make you particularly excited about certain days or times or anything like that? How do you use that?
I do believe in that whole, I do believe in the moon guide and all that. I do think there's a lot of truth in that. And Adam Hayes turned me on to it years ago when Whitetail Addictions was, first starting off. And I remember, that being brought up then. And I think you have about 4 to 5 days prior to a full moon that is just killer in the evenings. And then there's about a 3-day span when that full moon is going on. It just doesn't seem to be that great. And then you got about 4 or 5, probably 4 days roughly after that full moon, and it just seems like the evening or the mornings are just really, really good. And I like when you're coming off the backside of that full moon, that's a great time to slip in and hunt a buck in a bed, just because they're going to be getting back late, and you actually have a chance of getting in there and beating them in and killing them on the way back in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems that approach right there with the moon is just another one of those sets of criteria that points right back to what we were talking about earlier. Like, when do you swing for the fences? When do you not? And you mentioned sometimes it's the trail camera data, sometimes it's the moon, or sometimes, like you said earlier, weather trumps all. But best case scenario, it's when all three combine, right? Like when you see all those things all meshing and pointing towards, oh wow, tomorrow all these things line up. That's, at least for me, when I get like the jitters. I can't sleep the night before. When I'm getting geared up that day, I'm just like pumped. I'm already sweating. Like, those are the nights, like, I know this is the killing night. This is the killing day, whatever it is. Those are my very favorite parts of the season, when you have that anticipation.
And I think a lot of things that you just said there too, it's that confidence. You're going into that hunt with that confidence. And I think when you're confident in your setup, in your scouting, I think that's just so, I don't know, it's a mindset, and it just puts you in the game. Because if you're sitting there and you're second guessing yourself, then you probably should get down.
Yeah, that's not a good place to be. That mindset you mentioned, that's an interesting thing. I mean, you've had tremendous amount of consistent success. Your buddies like Andrae or Heath or Cody or Adam Hayes, all these guys are all consistently getting it done. And in a lot of different places too. So it's not like you can't just say, oh, it's just because they hunt a 1,500 acre farm with huge bucks all the time. You're getting it done in different kinds of places in somewhat different kinds of ways. I gotta believe mindset is one of the things that's probably consistent within, a lot of you guys. If you had to kind of describe some aspects of what that mindset is, or what some of these consistent things are that maybe you and your buddies all have in common, or that you've learned from Andrae or anything like that, what would you think those things are that kind of set those elite deer hunters apart from your average ho-hum?
I think it just having so much confidence in your scouting that you just truly believe in your head that when you go in, you never just sit to sit. Like, when you go and you set, you truly believe that you're going to kill the deer that you're after that night. I'm a busy guy, with work and family and everything. And like, I don't, I have a young son, and I don't want to miss out on some of those things, with my family and stuff like that, because I'm just going out to set. When I go to set, I go to kill. And I think that's exactly the way that those guys think about it as well. They have done every bit of scouting that they can possibly think of doing, and put a lot of different factors in their favor, from the wind to the moon to a cold front, or all those things, that when they go in, I think every one of those guys, as you mentioned, I think they go in and I'm killing the steer tonight, and that's it.
So that's scouting. How do you scout the right way to get you to that point? How do you, what are some of the things that you're doing? And I know you've mentioned some of that already, but if you had to like describe how to scout in such a way to give you that bulletproof confidence, what are some of those very most important things? Because I think when people hear scouting, your new hunter might think, oh, walk through the woods, and if I see a rub, cool, I'm going to hunt that. But then when I talk to some of those elite hunters, it's a different level. I'm kind of curious what that different level looks like for you.
Typically, if I'm speaking of here at home in Ohio, I put a lot of eggs in that basket of shooting a good buck in October or late season. I have not shot a lot of bucks in November here. I just haven't. I haven't had a lot of luck with it, and I tend to leave and go out of state. But I do so much in regards to learning the deer that I'm after. A lot of times I know of these bucks for several years. The buck I killed this past year, I knew for 3 years. The deer that I killed in 2018, I knew of that buck for 4 years. So I had a lot of information, and I think like a lot of guys do these days, keeping very detailed trail cam records, paying close attention to dates. I tend to see a lot of deer do the same things on the same dates on the same locations. And I also look for that sign that was left from the year before, and as far as maybe it's big rubs, or maybe it's that one scrape that got opened back up again. And knowing that deer had did that same thing the year before, and knowing my farms, to be able to manipulate that situation, to use all those scouting tools against that deer. If that makes sense. I mean, yeah. It's kind of the way I do it. I use a lot of cameras. I think last year, I ran about 45 cameras last year.
Wow. And how many on like I don't know, if we're saying per 100 acres or per 40 acres or something like that, like what kind of density of cameras in a small area do you run?
Say it's a 50-acre farm, I might have, maybe 4.
Okay. Maybe
4 or 5, something like that. And some of those cameras, though, I put out, and some of them I put out like really early, and I don't. A lot of times they just soak, and I never go in there and mess with them or anything, just because of where maybe they're at, depending on the situation. And then I will, at the season's over, I'll go in there and pull that SD card, and then and dig through it and start building a folder for certain bucks and what they were doing and at certain times and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's something that I've done a little bit of and trying to do more of too. But it brings up a good question, or something that I wonder a lot about, which is doing what you're describing there when you are targeting a specific buck and trying to learn that buck and like kind of build up that portfolio of information like you described. Something like I've kind of fallen into a rut a little bit with my cameras, where I know this is on properties that I know already. I know good places to get pictures. I kind of use them just to keep tabs on kind of inventory of, are these bucks still around? There's safe spots to get to. I can easily come in and out. I'm not blowing things up. But I have not used cameras as much to try to micro pattern a specific buck on a specific year, like some guys do. Some people will take their cameras and keep moving them every time they see a buck or every time they get new pictures. They kind of tighten the noose of the cameras. How do you go about with your placement? Are you doing kind of like the safe inventory, or do you move them around to try to fine tune what that buck's doing? What are you doing there?
Typically, I don't move them a lot. Typically, I'm getting what I want already, unless I see a deer from afar and I have not gotten a picture of that deer or something like that. Then maybe, maybe I might move a camera, but even then, a lot of times if I see a deer from afar, and then my next move is slide over there and kill him. Instead of trying to go over there and, booger up the spot by putting in a camera or something like that. Typically, yeah. I do make a lot of, I like mock scrapes. I think they work, great. And especially when, being able to, you get inventory or, something along those lines. What's been a real big tool for me for the last probably 3 years is I have an electric bike, and that's been huge because I can literally fly around these farms and nothing ever knows I'm there because my feet hardly even hit the ground. I mean, there's a lot of times I won't even let my feet hit the ground because I'll just pull right up and grab a hold of a tree with my gloves on and pull an SD card out, and boom, I'm taking off again. That's helped me too in regards to being able to hunt stands multiple times, because before it was, the first time in was the best time. And well, now, I don't think those deer, they're not cutting my back trail anymore. I've killed a couple bucks with my bike at the base of my tree.
Really? So it's funny. I was just thinking about this earlier today, was kind of debating internally, are the e-bikes worth it? Is it just a fad? Is it, I don't know. Is it all it's cracked up to be? I've bounced back and forth. I've certainly seen, or I understand the concept, the fact that, not having your boots hitting the ground is going to be a good thing. And it seems to me that, rolling through on a bike is going to be less concerning to a deer probably than seeing or hearing the footsteps of a person. Would you say that, those are the things that are making it so useful? And I mean, you kind of said this made a big difference, but you're bought in, huh?
100%. I can ride right by deer that are bedded on that bike. And one thing I have noticed, it's funny, I can ride right by deer that are bedded on that bike, and as long as I don't stop or make much eye contact, if I really jerk my head around, they don't seem to like that, and they get up. Or if I slow up or stop, they're going to get up and move. But I feel like there's a lot of times I can slide right by them. They stay bedded. They, maybe it's 3-4 does bedded on a fence row or something like that. And I can just go right by them, where maybe in years past, they would get up, take off, and run into where the deer that I'm trying to kill is. And then, he's not coming out then if, you got stuff like that going on. And the other thing is like getting in and out of those tree stand. Like, big part of it is how many times have you walked in mid-October and it's a little warm out, and by the time you get there, you've worked up a good little lather. That bike's like an air conditioning unit.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's it's tempting. Yeah,
I love mine. Mine's a huge, and the other part of it is too, if you have a family, and sometimes we're limited on time. Sometimes the things that might take us, say you're going to go check trail cameras that day or whatever it is, or maybe you're going to go over and just scout out something real quick. I can do it in half the time now and be home, spending my time more wisely. I've gotten done everything I wanted to in the whitetail woods, but now I'm back home, spending time with my family.
Yeah. It's all about efficiency. What do you think about impact from an e-bike compared to like an ATV or a UTV or driving up with your truck and checking a camera? Do you feel like it's even less of an impact than something like that?
I think driving up in a truck, I just don't think I don't think that bothers them that much. The ATVs, I do think that does bother them. I've seen it. I've been in bedding areas hunting with deer around me and hear like ATVs fire up on, say I have a lease or something like that with a couple buddies or whatever, and they hear those ATVs, and I'm telling you, they do not like them. I think they've had a lot of bad experiences with them over the years, and they just seem to be bothered by just to sit there and watch deer that are completely bedded and comfortable, and to hear that ATV, now they're on their feet and they're nervous.
There definitely is a stronger noise association, probably just because it's such an aggressive sound. I'm sure they got great ears no matter what. They'll hear a truck too, but yeah, it does. I do wonder about that. When you're rolling through on a bike, it just feels stealthier, and maybe that ends up being the case.
Yeah, it just and it is nice though when you can, I know there's times where I might have some cameras out where I can pull right up with my truck and literally out the passenger or out the driver's window and pull SD cards, and I don't think that bothers them. I know tractors definitely don't bother them. I mean, my God, there's times where I'm putting food plots in and the deer are just pouring out in the other section of the food plot, and they just don't seem bothered by the tractors at all.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I've seen the same thing, but then I've always worried. So I'm fast forward now towards like harvest time. I had a situation where I was chasing a buck last year during the fall, and I can't remember exactly when it was, sometime in November. And I had a situation where the farmer had picked part of the field, but not all of it yet. And I went in there moved to this spot for the evening hunt, and just like 2 rows had been picked right in the edge of the field. So I was sitting there with the edge picked, but still standing on the interior. And everything was lined up good with wind, and I think I saw him the day before or something, and I felt good that, he'd be visible and would come out here checking all these does that I thought would flood into that just picked stuff. And the farmers hadn't come. It was just about prime time, and I thought, all right, this is ideal. And then they showed up with like an hour and a half left or something like that, and they started picking again. And I've seen plenty of times where deer feel pretty comfortable with the tractors and everything, but at the same time, I haven't seen like a mature buck step out and not be spooked once the tractor comes rolling by, within 50 yards of him. He'll bump off into the woods again and then come back out later, something like that. So I decided, because of my positioning, I couldn't shoot into the timber because there was a property line back there, and my only shot would be if he came into this field. And I decided, you know what, with the tractors moving through here, I just don't think I'll actually get a shot at him. I got to move to another spot where he won't be, if he does come through, he won't be spooked by that tractor circling through over and over again. So I moved. And then I sat there that whole time thinking, maybe I should have stayed. Maybe I should have stayed, because that's where all the does ended up being anyways. What have you found as far as that? Would you set up on a field that's getting picked in November, or would you try to get inside a little bit?
I would probably try to get inside if they're out there and during that time, and if they're out there, driving the grain wagons and filling them up and running the combine and stuff like that. I would probably step back a little bit, because I would just, in my head, I would think that a mature deer would not want to be out there during that time frame. But then again, I've seen where it's November 8th or 9th, and there's does out there. I've seen some big bucks right out there with them too before. I think it all has to do with the timing of the year of when that's happening. But then the following day after that's taken place, and say they've came in and picked the beans or corn or whatever, you can guarantee you that field's going to be hot.
Yeah.
For a good little bit.
Yeah, you can't beat that. Speaking of something like that, one of the things that you mentioned a little bit ago, and I wanted to go back to, kind of revolves around fresh, hot intel or sign versus old sign or old intel, and kind of working off of annual trends or patterns. So I know you said you've seen deer do the same thing year after year to a degree. At the same time, I know I've heard you say, and folks like Andrae or Dan Infalt or different people get really fired up about fresh, hot sign. How do you think about the importance of those two things? You know, if you see a red hot, fresh rub, big rub or something, is that more important to you than knowing that such and such buck came through here, 2 weeks earlier, the last 2 years? I don't know. I'm just kind of curious what you think about the two different types of sign and how that factors into your decision-making process.
I think, I'm going to use every part of that. I'm going to use the information that maybe I documented through trail cameras over the years of having a deer maybe move through a certain area at the same time. But, I've always been interested in sign and big rubs. I mean, that's always had me super excited. And, and I remember like years ago, always, in scouting with my grandfather years ago, if you can stick 4 fingers in there, that's typically a good buck, and, the length of the track and the way maybe a certain deer's track is shaped. Maybe he's got a, maybe there's a little thing there to identify that deer from years past or whatever. But I love fresh sign. If it's red hot, fresh, there's nothing better. I think a lot of times guys hunt. I think a lot of guys hunt sign that's just too old, like, that's a week or two old, where I tend to, I look at it and try to soak it in. But if I'm looking for big rubs, I want sap coming out of, I want the sap coming out of that thing and fresh, and the fresh tracks, or, the scrapes that had just been hit, or, but then again, sometimes I'll set back a little bit and watch that sign and maybe see if I can see that deer and then make my move. I do a lot of observation sets. And if I see a deer do something, I typically don't like to let him do it again without killing him. I like to just go right in.
Okay. So this is another one of those things that I'm always finagling with myself, is what you just described. You see a buck do something once, and it's okay. Do you wait to see if it's a trend, or do you go in there right away? It sounds like you go in there right away. Tell me about how you set up. Do you set up as if he's going to do the exact same thing, or do you set up with some kind of knowledge? Okay, I know he came from there, but now I think because the wind's a tiny bit different, or because I think something else. I just walk me through how you choose to set up on that next day after the observation, because that's a really important move when you make that swing for the fence move.
I always, the wind is always the biggest factor in it all. Whatever the wind's doing, if it's the same thing as it was the day before, which is preferably what you really want, because then he felt comfortable enough to move then that determines a lot of how I move in. And I still go with that flirting with disaster 9 times out of 10, because I just I see a lot more big deer on their feet by using a wind that has something to their advantage, and just try to get off to the one side of that, and if it's not the same, then I might say, okay, I think he's gonna, I play it out of my head, and I think, okay, maybe he's going to, hook around this end of this ridge, or this, this field edge or whatever it might be, and just try to think. I try to anticipate his movement, basically off of just, if I was him, what I would do.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co, and make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater.
We've all seen plenty of gadgets and fads come and go, but here's one product that stood the test of time: Seafoam Motor Treatment. Lots of hunters and anglers know that Seafoam helps engines run better and last longer. And it's really simple. When you pour it into your gas tank, Seafoam cleans harmful fuel deposits that cause engine problems. I'm talking common stuff like hard starts, rough engine performance, or lost fuel economy. Seafoam is an easy way to prevent or overcome these problems. Just pour a can in your gas tank and let it do its job. Now, you probably know someone who's used a can of Seafoam to get their truck or boat going again, because people everywhere rely on it to keep their trucks, boats, and small engines running the way they should the entire season. So, help your engine run better and last longer. Pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store, or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.
Do you here's something I'm curious about. Do you feel like the wind direction influences not just the way they're going to travel, but also where they choose to bed? Because when I'm thinking through that scenario you just laid out there, the first thing I thought was, okay, just like you said, if it's the same wind the next day, then I'm going to go in there kind of thinking he'll do something similar because the wind's the same. If the wind's different, again, I would think, okay, it's a different wind, so I'm going to make some assumptions. He's going to adjust a little bit, but I can still take something from the observation yesterday, which maybe could be, okay, I know where he came from. So let's say it's an evening hunt, and I can then assume, okay, he's probably bedded somewhere over there. That's the clue I'm going to take away from the observation yesterday. But if it's a different wind, do I need to worry that maybe he bedded somewhere completely different because it was a different wind direction? How do you feel about wind impacting that?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I've seen them bed all the way. Say you have a field and there's two different wood lots. I've seen them bed, in one wood lot one day based off the wind, and then the next day everything switches and they're bedding in the wood lot across from the field. I definitely think that is a huge factor, and I think bucks have typically, I think they have 2 or 3 different bedding areas. Based upon what the wind and the terrain is doing. And, I think they're, and you get into stuff, you get into some stuff with some hills and some valleys and stuff like that. And they're going to use those thermals to their advantage, in a big way too. And, I totally agree with you. And I think that they have several different bedding areas typically. No, I don't think one buck has just one bed.
Yeah.
One bed. I just don't think that's possible.
Yeah. Now, have you ever nailed down a buck so well that you could predict, all right, if I've got a south or west, he's probably going to be bedded in this little area. If I've got a north or a east, he's probably bedded in this area, or anything like that? Have you ever been able to nail it that consistently that you could predict which general bedding area he's using based off a wind direction or anything?
I wouldn't say I can completely, because it seems like every time I think I have it completely figured out, then I get the master makes me look like a fool.
Yeah.
But I think I've come close to that, but I can't say that I've ever had it so narrowed down that that it was just a done deal sort of thing.
But you kind of have to work as if you do, right? Like, this is one of the things I was thinking to myself about last year. I started going into hunts with this idea that sometimes you make assumptions. Like, you have these clues, like you've watched this buck and you've seen, and so you go into a hunt and you assume, okay, I think because I've got a certain wind direction, he's probably bedded over here, or you saw him moving last night and he went into this food source or something. So you have these different clues and you're assuming that something's going to happen. I used to go into my hunts assuming something would happen or thinking something would happen, but then I'd keep on trying to prepare for contingencies. So I'm like, oh, I think he might come out into this food source, but he might go here instead, but he might go here. So then sometimes I'd find myself picking a tree that kind of is in the middle of it. So, okay, maybe he could come here, maybe he come here, maybe come here. But then last year, I think it was, I started saying, well, if you do that, then you're never in the perfect place for the one thing. And so if he does come through and he doesn't do the one perfect thing, you're screwed. So I started operating under this another idea where I would instead go into a hunt and I'm thinking through these clues and I'm making assumptions, but then I'm going to eventually pick what I think is the very most likely thing, like my plan A, and then I'm going to set up perfectly for plan A and assume that's the truth. So I'm going to say, okay, it's a south wind. I'm going to assume he's bedded in this area. So now I'm going to do everything perfect for that scenario. I'm going to make sure that there's no way my wind blows in there. I'm going to make sure there's no way that something happens. I'm going to set up in the perfect tree for this scenario, rather than just being in like a general zone because I think, well, this. And I can't remember where it was that I heard you say this, but you said something very similar. You said that there was a shift for you when you went from hunting the area to hunting the tree. Is that, do you think through things kind of similar to what I was just describing there? Or how do you do that?
For sure. That was a big, when I first started like really getting after and I set out and I was like, man, I want to kill a Pope and Young buck. That's a gross Pope and Young deer. That's really what I want to do. And I had a climber, and man, you're so limited with those climbers. And I felt like a lot of times I was just off the mark because I was forced to hunt a tree that was more like a telephone pole than where I truly needed to be. And then once I switched over and got introduced to, the climbing sticks and a hang on and stuff like that, that changed everything for me as far as being able to not just see the deer that I was after, but to be in the tree and get a shot opportunity at a good buck. That changed a lot of things for me as far as my success rate going up from there. And I think a lot of times we search for these perfect situations and where you're not giving up anything at all. You just have to learn to kind of live with that part of it. Like, man, I gotta give some stuff up here because it's just, it's where I need to be. But they're gonna have these deer. They're gonna have some advantage to that, and that just made, when I started hunting the tree, is when my success went way up. I think a lot of people just fall in a rut of there's so many people out there just, they have their ladder stands and they get out there every single year and kind of hunt the same spots. And a lot of guys do, they do well with that. But I also see a lot of those guys, kill a good buck every 3 or 4 years. And I work way too hard at this to kill one that far and few in between. I want to kill a good buck every year, if not two.
Yeah. Do you think that are you picking the tree in most scenarios for you? Is picking the killing tree happening in March, or is it happening on October 16th?
Both. I think I think it's both. I think there's times, especially here, where I'm scouting and I know a lot of my farms pretty well, unless it's a new piece of ground or something like that. Then if it's a new piece of ground, I won't hang a stand on it at all, because I have to hunt it to be able to figure that part of it out. And sometimes it might take me a little bit to figure that out. I feel like you need sometimes a couple years to really like dial that in and say, okay, like I really, really know what's going on. But if it's a farm I've been hunting for a while and I know it based off of the deer movement I've seen in the past and so on and so forth, and also maybe there's some crop rotation that year, where maybe in a year before that or something, I notice a certain area was really, I'll go in there and hang a stand and leave it. I have quite a few stands that I leave in my farms, but then again, I also read that sign, and as season goes on, and pay attention to my cameras and make a move when I need to. I mean, when I go out of state, I typically never leave any stands hanging anywhere on any farms I hunt out of state. I mean, it's a scout midday, it's a hang it. I hunt it that evening. I leave all my stuff, including my bow and everything, in the tree, and I come right back in, hunt it again the next morning, and either I'm in the spot and I stay put based on if the wind's still good for me, and if it's not, I just tear it back down and scout some more and just repeat until I kill a buck.
Yeah. I've always I've thought, and I've sort of wished, but I can't quite make myself do it, but I've always thought it'd be pretty cool to just take a season and not hunt, and instead just follow someone around, like follow you around, follow Andrae around, follow Adam around, and get to just kind of stand behind your shoulder when you go into a scenario like that, and then have you talk out loud everything you're thinking about as you're walking through the woods in your scouting session, and as you're, picking the tree, and as you're sitting there in the tree that night and trying to deliberate about what to do the next day. That would be so fascinating. I just can't convince myself to give up my actual hunting. But if I did that, if I somehow convinced you to allow me to walk with you in the woods, and you're doing your scouting midday and you found the zone and now you're going to pick the tree, can you walk me through what would be going through your mind as you're trying to, and maybe there's a specific past scenario you can describe, or maybe you can imagine something, but kind of walk me through all the things that are going through your mind as you're trying to pick the killing spot on that day, on November 8th or whatever it is.
So I'm just kind of thinking back on a hunt from a few years ago in Iowa, and I'd noticed I was hunting the back side of this farm, and I was coming out after a morning hunt, and I noticed that there was some really good sign up along this timber edge, and it had this whole hillside that was just covered in just the nastiest stuff that you can imagine. And I remember coming out, and I'm like, man, I need to set up somewhere in here, because just based off the sign. And there was a couple big scrapes that I could tell that they had just been hit, and just the terrain features and everything, just the way it laid, it just felt right. It's just, sometimes you just got to go off of some gut feeling too sometimes.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I did this, but I didn't have a stand with me. I had to went back up to the truck and get a stand and sticks, and then come back and then hunt it that evening or whatever. I went and hunted a completely different farm that evening because I had a stand already hung in there. So I went the lazy route. and we all do this at times. And I was out there. I was there for about 4 or 5 days, and I think I was getting kind of tired. And I went back after that evening hunt, and I'm like, why didn't you go over there and hang that set? You saw the sign. All the sign was there. And I remember sitting there thinking, I'm like, you know what? If I look at this phone and that wind is coming out of the north for tomorrow morning's hunt, I got a feeling those bucks are going to cruise that down one side of that whole hillside that's just nasty, and there's got to be a ton of does in there. And I pulled that phone out, I looked at it, and I thought, that's it. That's what it's doing. And I went over there that morning in the dark, and I hate doing hanging hunts in the dark because you never know. Once you get up there, you're like, oh, this is great, but I can't shoot anywhere.
When that light comes up, it's like, oh boy, what are we going to have?
What's that? It broke up pretty good.
I said when it starts getting light out, you're always kind of crossing your fingers.
Yeah, because you have no clue what you're gonna be dealing with. So I go in there, hunt the stand. I see 2 shooters that morning. I mean, 2 good ones, and I was about 80 to 100 yards off the mark. And we all tend to do this a little bit, and you're like, man, now I got to tear this whole thing down again and move it over there. But I just knew I had to do it. I just had to do the work. Well, that's what I did. And I tore it down, slid it about 80 to 100 yards over there because one of the bucks came out of this ditch, and then another one later on headed into that ditch. And I thought, well, I'm going to catch either one of these 2 bucks, and I'd shoot either one of them. And so I moved that set. I did the work, and that evening it was just a downpour, and I couldn't even hunt it if I wanted to. So, and I left everything in there. Like, I left my bow and everything in the tree. I'm pretty good about that. And so I go back in the very next morning and get in that tree, and it was raining pretty good even that morning when I got up, and I go out there, and that deer, one of the deer that came out of the drainage the day before, he came back out of the drainage and went up that hillside that morning. And I waited till he got up. I didn't want to call to him. I wanted something to block, because I hate calling to a deer and they just turn around and just like, boom, they're right on you. Like they've already figured out exactly where that is, and they bust in a tree. I let him get up the hill a little ways. He got behind a cedar, and I snort wheezed at him, and I saw him stop and swing his head around. And I could just see his cage turn. And he stood there for a second. I knew he was thinking about it. So I waited till he slowly turned his head back the opposite way again, and I hit him again and snort wheezed at him, and he came right down and gave me like a 25-yard shot, and it was that scouting and doing the work and seeing that sign, thinking about what the wind was going to do for that following morning. For 2 days in a row, it came out the north and blew straight down. And those bucks they just cruised that downward side of that bedding area, and it just played out perfect.
So I've got 2 follow-up questions on that. One, the day before, when you're sitting there hunting and you saw the 2 bucks do that move 80 yards away, What time did you get down to make your move? This is something I always debate internally too. I'm always wondering, what is the exact best window that is should you just go right away, or should you wait till you think the slowest part of the day will be and make your move? When do you, if you have like a midday hang and hunt move that you're going to make, when's that window you like to do it?
I tend to be a little more, I kind of wait it out a little bit just to make sure kind of thing, but about 10:30. I'm sliding over there, and that gives me a little bit of time to find to scout a little bit more. And I already saw what those deer were doing, so a lot of times I'll scout up so far, and I'll use my binoculars a fair amount to scout up ahead of me. So I'm not laying any ground scent down up ahead of me where they might cross it, maybe, when I'm, at night or whatever it might be. I'll say, okay, I can kind of see that trail over there. That's where they seem to want to be. I don't need to go any farther than this. I'm about 20 or 25 yards away. And I put the brakes on and get set up. But yeah, about probably 10:30, 11 o'clock. And then that way I can have my way with that spot.
Yeah. That seems to be kind of where I've thought that sweet spot is, because it's late enough that there's not that super early morning movement, but you're not quite into that, midday window where those big bucks sometimes get on their feet and start cruising again. Of course, it can vary. It could be any time, but I kind of feel like that 10 to 11 window is a little bit of a possible lull. So I like that too. Now, a little more on how you picked that specific tree, though. So you moved in there after you saw them. You wanted to be downwind of that thick bedding area, but closer to that ditch where they came in and out. You're glassing as you work your way over there. How did you end up picking that specific tree to hang up? I'm curious, were you paying attention to height or how high you could get into a tree? Did you look for a certain kind of tree? Did you, I don't know, anything like that was running through your mind? Or did you just want to be within shooting range of that ditch trail that was coming in and out and making sure the wind wouldn't blow there?
I wanted to be within, it all goes back to hunting the tree. And I wanted to be in the tree that's going to give me at least a shot opportunity at that ditch over there. I felt like that ditch was kind of like the key to everything. Well, then I get over there, and the next thing height does not make a difference to me at all. I see guys that will hunt super high, and sometimes the higher you get, the smaller that kill zone gets. That particular tree, I was probably 12 foot, but I had the cover. And that was the most important thing to me, and will always be. A lot of times, in Kansas, we go out there and we get in those cedar trees sometimes, and my God, I'm 5-6 foot off the ground, and I'm like bulletproof, and nothing ever busts me out of those things. I think, and I knew too, because that was kind of in the bottom down there, like even being that low, even if the wind's coming back over, but being in the bottom in the morning, I knew when that rise happened in the morning, I knew everything was just going to get sucked straight up as well. And it made that spot like literally bulletproof. And it's funny because of knowing about that spot, I returned to that same farm 3 or 4 years later whenever I drew another tag, and I could not get a north wind. Like literally the whole time I was there, I was like, oh my God, I want to get back in there. I know that spot's still good. And as soon as I did, I got in that same tree and killed another buck.
Wow. It's pretty awesome when you find a spot like that.
Yeah, it's just one of those spots that, and it's funny because my buddy that owns that farm, when I first killed that first buck there, he's like, "Where did you shoot that buck at?" And I told him, he's like, "Never even hunted over there before." And I'm like, "Really?" I'm like, "Dude, I'm telling you, that spot's like, I'm telling you, that's the spot." And then I come back out there a few years later, and I kept telling him, I'm like, "Man, I want this wind to switch out of the north. I want to get back into that spot again." And he goes, "I still have never gone over there and hunted that section." And I'm like, "I'm telling you, that spot is money." I said, "If I can get back in that tree this week, and if I don't have one down already," I said, I'll kill a buck over there." And by 8:00 that morning, I texted him. I said, "I just smoked one." And he calls me. And he says, "Did you really?" I'm like, "I'm telling you, this spot is it's bulletproof." And I was on the phone with him, and he's like, "Man, I'm gonna have to go over there and set this evening, and see if I can't get a crack at one." And so we got my deer out, and we came. And he came back, and jumped up in my stand, and he almost killed another big one that evening.
Jeez. Sometimes those spots are, it kind of goes back to the annual trend thing a little bit. Like, things happen for a reason. I always try to, when I see something or I find like a hot spot like that, or I see a buck do something, I try to analyze, why it happened. Because usually things don't, not always, but usually things don't happen by chance. There's usually a reason why a buck moved through a certain area. So in that case, maybe it was that cover feature and the terrain features all coming together that, year after year, bucks are going to use that area. Or when you see a one-off deer sighting at some other point, you think about, like, you described, like, how he was using the wind. Think about why he moved in that way or why he did this. That seems to be another one of those, I don't know, things that I keep hearing from folks year after year having success. They're always asking why. They're always trying to kind of micro-analyze observations or data to kind of, again, it's that idea of pick the tree, not the zone. It's, get the details right, not the fuzzy big picture. It just seems to be the difference.
It's, something I picked up with Andrae a long time ago was the fact that, here's a guy that, my God, the guy's killed like 18 gross Boone and Crockett's,
Jeez.
With his bow. And his living room is ridiculous. It's like, the kind of bucks and how many bucks this guy has killed over the years. The one thing I've always noticed about him is whenever he's talking to somebody, like, just working shows and stuff like that with him, or just, us being around just other people and talking, I always see him asking a lot of people questions. And it's funny to me that a guy as successful as he is, that he's asking anyone questions, but he's always trying to soak it in. I think that's what has been my observation with him at times.
That's very interesting. It does seem to be one of those things, no matter how successful you are, those very best deer hunters are constantly still trying to learn. They're constantly still trying to find what that next thing is. What's that next edge they can find? It's a lifelong process, I guess, right?
Yeah, for sure.
What do you think? What do you think if you had to identify like the next area that you need to work on? Is there any kind of weakness, or is there any kind of thing you're really still curious about, or that you're still trying to nail down? Does anything jump to your mind when I bring that up?
Yeah, one thing that I would like to be a better rut hunter if that's possible. Like, I have a tough time with the rut. It's, like, don't get me wrong. I've for sure, I've shot some, great bucks, in November, but that's a really frustrating time for me.
Just because the randomness?
Yeah. I mean, just, of deer, just, and I'm like, I'll get into the routine just like everybody, like I'm going to hunt some downwind side of some doe bedding areas, or maybe I might hunt a pinch here or there or whatever.
Yeah.
It just, I feel like the rut is just luck half the time. There's not a lot of skill, that goes along with shooting, those bucks. Terrain features are probably the biggest thing, I think. But yeah, I would like to definitely, better my skills at, learning how to hunt the rut more efficiently than what I do.
Well, that's probably a good thing. There's a lot of guys probably that are in the reverse situation where the only time they can kill a good buck is during the rut, and they need to try to figure out on the other sides. So it's nice to be in the scenario where you can kill bucks pretty consistently in the tougher parts of the season than the other way. One last couple questions. I've been talking your ear off here for a long time. But I had
That's all right.
two like specific tactical questions related to what we were just talking about a second ago. Back to the setting up on these hanging hunts.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, when you're moving to midday to set up in a new spot and you found that perfect tree, do you do trimming? Or are you worried about spooking things and you're not going to trim? Like, that's something I'm always debating is how many lanes do I open up? Do I do anything, or do I just quietly get set up and hunt? I guess just answer me that. Trimming. What's your perspective on that, on these middle of the day hang and hunt type deals?
I definitely trim. I prefer not to if I don't have to. That's my, what I prefer. Sometimes, in those cases, if it looks like, say, I'm going to have to trim a lot, then that's where I'm definitely going to try to stay low to minimize that, because the higher you get, the more trimming that you're going to end up getting into. But yes, I've got into some trees before where I knew I should have done some trimming and didn't, and it cost me a deer. So I don't do that anymore. If I need to open up something a little bit, but I always keep in perspective of my shots are 20 yards, 20 or 25 yards, and don't try to, I see guys get a little nutty with the trimming, and it ends up costing them a deer because, they crack them beforehand because, I grew up a big coon hunter, and was way into that when I was a kid, and a good coon dog will drift a track from a distance. And so if a dog can do that, a deer definitely can do that as well. So I want them to at least make it to that location before that scent that drifted in their direction froze them up.
Yeah. So you don't want to be walking all over the place, opening up 15 different shooting lanes.
No, maybe 1, 2.
Yeah. There's the window types of trimmers like that, and then there's the runway strips. Some guys like those too.
Yeah.
I tend to be more along your lines. Okay. One more question on that line of thinking, which is, you do a lot of the hanging hunting. You're running with a lot of folks that do that kind of stuff too. Do you have a pro tip or two as far as the actual setup of sticks in your stand that have helped you do it more quietly or quicker or more efficiently? Are there any little systems you put in place over the years that have made you good at that?
I ran the the Lone Wolf stand and sticks for years, and ran the XOP stand and sticks as well. All D'acquisto designed stands, but now, I'm running all the Lone Wolf custom gear stand and sticks. To me, it's the most thought out system that is on the market. And I'm not just saying that because, I'm affiliated with those guys, but I do believe it's the lightest. It's the way it stacks. Like this year, I'm going to run, the Lone Wolf Custom Gear 1.0 with the mini sticks with the 8ers. I think the whole thing is like 10 or 12 pounds. I mean, it's next to nothing. The lighter, the better. Something that actually Andrae had showed me, instead of running the straps all around the stands like we used to do and all that kind of stuff, I put just a little bag on the bottom of my seat that hangs down, and I throw all my straps in there. So they're not just all over the place and you're wrapped. I'm not doing that anymore. That's just a mess.
Interesting. Now, what about your getting up in the tree process with the sticks? How do you run that? Do you have them hanging off of you as you're climbing up in the tree, or do you pull them up on a rope? What's that look like for you?
I always put the stand on my back, and then first stick on, and then typically way I've always done it in the past is I just take the other 3 sticks or 2 sticks or however many sticks that I'm going to run moving forward from that ground stick, and I just always hang them on a branch, and I always have my stuff. I already have my my bag. My bag is usually attached to my stand, and once I get up, I take a screw in, throw my bag on there, and then pull my stand off and then hang it. And then my bow's already tied to the string that is on my stand, and then that way I don't have to come up and down the tree. I try to minimize that as much as possible.
Yeah, that seems to be the way to do it. All right, Justin, I am sufficiently fired up for some whitetails. What I really want to do right now is go drive some fields and scout for bucks, but I think I have to go in and feed my kids instead. So
Yeah.
I guess that's comes back to the efficiency thing. I got to figure out a way to be able to do both. But
what I might do is act like I'm still doing this podcast with you, and maybe do some of that driving around and say, oh, it just ran over a little bit.
That's a pretty good trick. That's smart. You got to figure it out. All right. So 1.5 sort of questions, and then we're going to close this down really quick. Last question. I'm starting to ask more and more people this every time. If you had a billboard on the side of the highway that all these deer hunters are going to drive by every day, and you wanted to just leave one lasting message with all these guys and girls, what would you put on that billboard?
Sometimes you have to get uncomfortable.
I like it. That's a good take home from those stories. That's been a theme for sure. All right. That's a good billboard. Get uncomfortable, get outside your comfort zone, sometimes go for the fences. Last question, Justin. If people want to see your episodes of Whitetail Addictions or follow along with anything that's going on from the show or Lone Wolf Custom Gear or anything like that, where can they see your stuff and all that other stuff too?
You can go to the Lone Wolf Custom Gear YouTube page. That's where you'll find all the Whitetail Addictions episodes, and a lot of the old episodes that are on there as well. Or go to www.lonewolfcustomgear.com. That's our website. That's where all of our gear is. Or you can follow me on Instagram at I'm actually, it's not Justin Hollandsworth, it's Mason's dad, 1975.
Nice. Get your priorities straight.
Yeah. And or Facebook or whatever. that's where you'll find all of our stuff at.
Very cool. All right, Justin, I've enjoyed this. Thank you so much for taking so much time to talk bucks.
I really appreciate you having me on. This was fun. I love it.
Let's stay in touch and exchange some pictures this fall with a couple dead bucks, huh?
For sure. I love it. That's the best part about this.
I agree. All right, well, talk to you again soon, Justin. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thanks for tuning in for this one. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I'm raring to go. It's summer. Velvet bucks are out there in the fields. Fall is going to be here before we know it, my friends. So get outside of your comfort zone. Start doing something different. Start working harder, working different. Break the routine now, and then prepare to do so again in the fall. Until next time, thank you again. I appreciate everything, your support, your time, your interest, your ratings, your reviews, your comments, your questions. It means the world. So until next time, thanks, and stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. MeatEater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the engineer's going to be there. MeatEater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new MeatEater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, MeatEater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Art Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.